I'm traveling across America to read 50 books in 50 states, and this week we're headed to Iowa to read The Bridges of Madison County, a romance set in the quiet countryside. While we're there, we're exploring the local landscape, checking out local bookstores, yapping about books, and finding scenic places to read. Stories come alive when you're standing where they're set, so join me in Iowa for the next stop in this adventure. Welcome to Iowa, the Hawkeye State if you prefer. Choosing a book for Iowa is a bit challenging because it's a very modest, under-the-radar state. No hate at all to Iowa, I actually grew up here, and there are so many communities full of hardworking people, but as you can imagine, there are not a lot of books written about Iowa. And while there are not a lot of books, there is one book that had so much success when it was published that it's pretty much a household name in the state of Iowa, and that is The Bridges of Madison County. It was actually not that long ago that I realized that this was a fiction book. It follows an intense love affair between a National Geographic photographer and a local farm wife. Now, the reviews on this are quite polarizing, so I'm very interested to see why a little book set in Iowa spent 3 years on the New York Times bestseller list. We're on a little bit of a tight timeline for this trip, so we're up bright and early to go grab a coffee and start reading. Okay, so I was able to get through about 50 pages at the cafe. My first impression is that the story is very intimate and quiet. It opens almost cinematically with Robert driving across the country, stopping along the way to take these photographs. It kind of goes into his backstory about how he's this free spirit who hasn't really been able to be tied down to any specific person or place. He's on his way to Iowa for an assignment for National Geographic to photograph these covered bridges. But of course, he gets lost and has to stop and ask for directions, where he conveniently meets Francesca, and her husband is also conveniently out of town. So she comes across as an artistic spirit too, but her life has been tied up by family obligations, farm obligations, and she hasn't really had a chance to express all of her artistry. On the surface, they live these completely different lives, yet there's a subtle undercurrent of recognition between them. You can just tell that she's surprised by him, and it's funny how she keeps finding these little reasons for him to stick around when really he could have just taken the photographs and been on his way. So far, I think the book really nails the Iowa landscape, and it's interesting how Francesca and Robert view it from different perspectives. He's over here treating these old bridges like a work of art, and she's like, I guess I just never really paid that much attention to them. It's a very understated beauty that feels very true to Iowa. That's where we're at so far. I think it might be fun to get outside for a little bit, so I think we're gonna head over to the park and continue reading. I got ran out of the park. So we're back at the hotel, and it's time for another reading update. We're about 100 pages in and really starting to see this romance start to develop. One thing that stands out to me is how Francesca is just this product of her environment. In Iowa, everything's about being practical and nobody's really thinking about art or beauty. She doesn't even realize how much she's been missing that kind of connection until Robert comes along, and suddenly she starts questioning her own marriage. And I think she just feels so stuck because Robert gives her this glimpse of what her life could be like if it was built on passion instead of just routine. This book is pretty short and it reads pretty quickly, so we're getting to the end. I only have about 70 or so pages left, so definitely should be able to finish it over the weekend. But I think that sounds like a great excuse to check out a local bookstore. The covered bridges are such an iconic part of this story, and they weren't too far from where we were staying. You know I love a little side quest, so let's take a little road trip to see one of the rail-covered bridges that inspired the story. Okay, it's our last day in Iowa and we're about to head back. We finished the book and I will share my thoughts on that soon. But I feel like it would be a disservice to bring you to Iowa and not stop by a farm. So I think we're going to make a quick stop on our way back. We are back in Minnesota after a quick weekend in Iowa, and we had a good time. A lot has changed since I lived in Iowa, so it was fun to have an opportunity to go back and visit the new bookstores and cafes, as well as finally get a chance to visit the famous Bridges of Madison County. The book does a beautiful job capturing the Iowa landscape and the intimate, quiet atmosphere. And I can definitely see why a lot of readers, especially women, can resonate with the story. And I think that's part of why it had so much success. I think that a lot of women see themselves in Francesca, kind of caught between obligation and desire. It's just a very bittersweet story that's incredibly realistic. It's actually so realistic that I had to do a little bit of research to figure out if this was fiction or a retelling of a true story, or if it was just an entirely nonfiction account. And the verdict is that it's a completely fictional story. It's loosely based on the author's own experiences, but it had me fooled. So I think that's maybe a testament to the storytelling. Overall, I think I would give this one about 3.5 stars. The writing is simple but elegant, so it really suits the Iowa setting. I enjoyed the read. I think its strength lies in how deeply it resonates with its intended audience. At times, I felt like the author understood Robert's character a lot better than Francesca's just by the way these characters were written, but that might just come from the story loosely being based on the author's own experiences. There were definitely a few cringy moments that you could tell this was just an over-the-top romance, but overall the narrative flowed pretty well. It's probably not a book that I would have picked up on my own, but reading it alongside the Bridges of Madison County made it a fun experience. To wrap things up, I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes from the story. "The old dreams were good dreams. They didn't work out, but I'm glad I had them." Iowa may not be the most flashy state, but there's still a quiet beauty there. Maybe it's just the romantic in me, but I think it's a good reminder that wherever you are, you can find something to appreciate. And that's my whole goal with this reading series, to be able to travel with a different perspective and to be able to appreciate these stories in a new context. With that, we can officially check Iowa off the list, and we are now 3 states down. As we get further into the series, I would love suggestions for places to visit, books that are set in your local state. So please leave your recommendations in the comments down below. Thank you for coming along with me to Iowa, and I will see you in the next one.